This is Chapter 3, Selections, Programming Exercise 5, Find Future Dates. So, we're going to write a program that prompts the user to enter an integer for today's day of the week. So, if it's Sunday, then 0, Monday is 1, and Saturday will be 6. Also, we're going to prompt the user to enter a number of days after today for a future day and display the future day of the week. So what does that mean? Let's simplify and let's get all that information down. So first thing, it says that it wants to prompt the user to enter an integer for today's day of the week. And if we're going to go by the given information, if 0 is Sunday, 6 is Saturday, then everything in between is 1 for Monday, 2 Tuesday, 3 Wednesday, 4 Thursday, and 5 Friday. And with this, we got all 7 days of the week. But starting from 0 to 6, Sunday to Saturday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for each of their respective dates. So hopefully that part of the information makes sense according to what is given right here, right? So what happened is we're going to input what today is. So let's say today is Sunday, then we'll enter 0. Alright? And if today is Wednesday, we enter 3. And if it's Saturday, 6. Monday, 1. Friday, 5. Thursday, 4. Tuesday, 2. Alright. Now let's try to tackle this. It says that let's say if the user enter 1, then our start date is Monday. And if the user entered 3 for a number of days in the future, then the future date is is Thursday, right? Because that's what they asked for the second part. First part, right? We break it down. First part is to enter what is today's date. Second part is to enter the number of days after today to find out the future day. So that's the target or what we're trying to accomplish here, to actually find out the future day. So given this, we could easily solve it by doing something like this. Enter current day, anything from 0 to 6, right, for the time being. So could enter 1 for Monday, and then let's say how many days into the future, right, and we'll say 3. So 1 plus 3, or 1 Monday plus 3 more days in the future is 4, and 4 is Thursday, which is what we got right here, right? Is that making sense so far? So with that, we could easily solve for this. Now, let's try for something a little more trickier. What if they enter 5 as the current date and 10 for 10 days into the future? What will we get? Well, let's say 5 plus 10. So 5, what is 5? 5 is Friday. And 10 days into the future, what is that future date? How are we going to solve that? Right, we could solve it in an easier way, right? We could just count Friday. So we'll just 1, go back to the beginning of the week, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, back again, 9, and 10. So that future day will be Monday. But how will we solve for that if we can't match 15 with Monday? But we know this is correct if we were to go in order to the next day of the week. Well, what we could do is simply use modulus to solve this problem. For example, let's say if future day is less than 7, then, well, if it's less than 7, we got a solution right here. Simple as that. If it's less than 7, it could be any of these days. But if it's greater than 7, well, we could just simply mod the number or from modulus on that number. So by 7, and we'll get our future date. So let's take this 10. 10 mod 7. 10 mod 7, what is that? Well, the remainder is 3. So then it'll be 5 plus 3 is 15. So that doesn't really work as well. So what if we just mod the whole thing? We add it together first, 5 plus 10, and then we mod it by 15. 15 mod 7 is 1. And we go back, oh look, 1 is Monday. That is correct. So that is how we're going to solve this if that case ever comes up, right? So does that make sense? Take a look at this and this. You could easily find 1 plus 3, 4, 4 is equal to Thursday, but what is 15? And in this case, I have a simple solution in case that occurs. All right. So with this given solution, let's try to create a program to actually solve it. Of course, there could be other tricks in the book that may not come to mind right now, but if you do have something that you thought up, feel free to try to add it to your code. All right, so let's see. Let's start off with creating some variables. We're going to need quite a few variables actually. The first variable we're going to need is something to store the current date, days into future, and then the future date. So let's create variables for these three so far that we know of. And let's actually use bytes because we're just solving for very small days, number of days right now. If we want to solve for bigger or larger numbers, we can always change it to a short, int, double, float, whatever works for your case. All right, so this is just a simple one so far, and let's just do something simple, small, and not use too much memory. We have current date. Let's see, we have number of days in the future, right? Future date, days into future, and future date. All right, days in the future, days into the future, and future date. All right, that will do for now. Do we need to do anything else for the time being? Well, not that anything comes to mind, but if I do need to, I can always come back to it. So let's just put a simple comment here and say these variables will store the current date, the numbers of days into the future, and the future date. All right, in case I forgot what I want to do with these. Now let's see what else. Well, one of the things that we're going to have to do, what we could do is, how about ask the user what is the current date. All right, so that'll be our next step. That'll be system.out.print what is the current date. Okay, and of course we're going to store that into this variable right here. But before we could store that, actually, let's just put a default value right here. I forgot to do one thing, and that is to be able to retrieve that value. And to retrieve that value, we're going to have to create a scanner, and I'm going to call this variable scanner type variable called input. Input equals new scanner system.in. So it's going to be able to read the system input. And there we go. So I'm going to replace that one with input.next byte. Reason for that is because this current date is a byte type variable, and it only holds byte type variable. All right, so it's going to take that, store that into there. Of course, the next thing I need to do is ask the user how many days into the future. Does that make sense? Ask the user how many days to future. Let me see what's the question. Let's see. Prompt the user to enter a number of days after today. Enter a number of days after today. Yeah, that would make more sense. Ask the user to enter the number of days after today. Okie dokie. System.out.print enter the numbers of days after today. Cool. Alright, and that will be stored into the variable called days into the future. Input.next byte. Alright, and finally we're going to try to solve it. Now, how do we solve it? Well, first let's take a look at what we have. We are able to grab the current date and the days in the future, and then with that we will have to try to check what that number is and then output the current date. But there's a few issues with that, and that issue is if future date equals to current date plus days into the future. Alright, now if this right here adds up to be greater than 6, right? Any number greater than 6, we're going to have an issue because we're not going to know. We're not going to be able to compare and find out which of these are the correct days into the future. So how are we going to solve for that? Well, we're going to use modulus, all right, which is exactly what I tried to explain right here. Else if, so if future day is less than 7, then try to then display the current date. Else if future day is greater than or equal to 7, then I'm going to mod that date by 7 and save it as my current date and then display the date according to a new date. Alright, but before I could do that, I actually have a little small issue here. Now, what does this issue say? It says that, hey, I found an integer, but I require a byte. Now, what's going on? I know for sure I created all of these variables as bytes. This is type byte, this is byte, and this is a byte. So why is this giving me an issue? Well, that's a little trick you have to learn about Java, or a little information, a little thing you need to know about Java. When you're adding a byte, this plus this, these are 2 bytes. Java automatically convert these 2 bytes into integers. All right, and now instead of trying to store bytes, it's actually storing an integer. So what could you do about this? Well, for now, the simplest way of explaining it is to be able to cast this integer back into a byte. And with that, you're now able to store this value into this variable right here. This integer has been converted, or I believe it's called downcasted and not upcasted, right? It's downcasted into a byte, which stores a smaller value, which is a smaller value than an integer, into this future date variable, which is also a byte, and now it works. Okay, now let's take a look. What do I have to do? Well, I have to actually compare this. If future date is greater than 6, all right, I'm gonna actually simplify this right here, and instead of writing 2 lines, more than 2 lines of, or more than 2 if statement, I could simply write 1 if statement to cover this whole thing. My if statement now says if future date is greater than 6, then perform this, and then I'm going to perform another task after that. So let me show you what I mean. If future date is greater than 6, and the reason for this, why it has to be greater than 6, is because I know for sure that any number less than 6 but is greater than a negative number will satisfy this condition. Alright, now that of course leads to another issue. What if the user enters a negative number? All right, so that could be solved later. Let me solve another issue first. So actually, let me write a to-do, because I didn't actually mention that earlier. To do, what if the user entered a negative number for the dates? Well, what will happen then? You'll find out. Of course, that will totally mess up our exercise right here. All right, so if future dates is greater than 6, simply what we could do is say future date modulo equals 7. So what this is saying is basically future date is equal to future date modded by 7. All right, so this is actually the same thing. So if, for example, if the number is 5, then this if statement is completely ignored and it'll jump to the next line of code. All right, it'll jump to after this curly brace here. After a curly brace, and look for any other new line of code. If there's no code, program will end. If there is code, it'll go on to read and perform that next line of code. All right, but if that number is actually greater than 6, well, then what happened is it'll perform whatever's inside this if statement, and in this case, a simple modulo will happen, right? So let's say future date is actually greater than 6. Let's say it's 10. Well, 10 modded by 7 is 3, and that 3 is stored back into future date, and we're going to use that future date. Right? Does that make sense? If not, let me know. Throw in a comment. I will try to I don't know, maybe edit the video to add more detail. All right, so now that we solved this issue, whether it's less than 6 or greater than 6, we could finally find out the future date. All right, that's what we've been looking for all this time, to find out that future date. And to do that, we're going to use a switch switch statement, is that what it's called, to solve this. And inside switch, it's going to have to take in a variable, and this variable is going to be read within the switch statement to solve quite a few cases that we're going to have. All right, it's called switch case, and we're actually going to use future date. So now it's going to take future date and it's going to compare. It's going to take a look. What I'm going to do is just something simple. I'm going to say, hey, if the case is 0, in case future date is 0, right? If future date is 0, it's going to compare this variable right here. Then it's going to print out system.out dot print the future date is Sunday. Let me get rid of this. All right. There we go. And for simplicity, actually, I forgot one more thing. After I'm done with that, I'm going to break out of it. I have no need to do anything else after. If that is the case, if future date is 0, I am done. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, now I just have to change that. As you can see, you can't have the same case. So if you do, you're going to get an error message because you shouldn't be having same cases. All right. Of course, not all the days are Sunday. It's going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Oh, I forgot one more. Did I? I did. All right, there we go. And that looks good with me. All right, now let's actually run this and see how that works. So let's see. Let's start with something simple. So let's say we'll start with today being Monday. What's the current date today? Let's say today's Monday, right? And then number of days into the future. Let me say into the future. Days into the future. All right, number of days in the future. So if today's Monday, right, 1 is for Monday, number of days into the future is 1. Therefore, it should say the future date is Tuesday. Correct. Let's try with a different number. So let's say we will do number of days will be let's make it 5. We could do 5 and 10 like we did before, and we found out that that was Monday. And the reason for that is 5 plus 10 modulo or modded by 7 is 1, and 1 is a Monday. So that's correct. All right, so we're pretty much good with the basic case so far. Now that goes back to what I said before of what if the user enter a negative number for the dates, and that is really going to mess with my solution by a lot, mess up the whole entire thing. So this is known as a bug, right? It's a bug, there's a flaw, there's a logic issue. We enter a 1, then we enter a negative 1. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. And well, if you think about this, this in a way is correct, right? 1 and the number of future days is negative 1, so you're going back in time. But that's not exactly what we're trying to solve here. We want to talk about days into the future, not days into the past. So what you could do is simply do a little check, right? You could do a little check right here and say if the numbers are negative, then divide a negative by a negative is a positive. And of course, the best number to divide a negative number is of course a negative 1, because any negative number that's greater than 0 divided by negative 1 will be that same number but positive. Is that correct? And of course, there's other cases, such as what if the current day is 0 and then you try to divide by negative 1? Well, of course, like I said, that could be solved by your if. Can a 0 be negative? Well, does Java take it first of all? Does Java take a negative 0? And then we have 1. Well, in this case, Java see a negative 0 simply as a 0. So you're pretty much good on that. But let's see what happened. Let's see. So we say something like system.out.print current date. Let's just say current date. And we were to run that and we enter negative 0. Well, Java will just take it as 0, so you never have to worry about dividing 0 by a negative number, because it will never be stored as a negative number when you enter negative 0. But of course, if it's any other number, any other integers, such as negative 1, it will of course definitely store that number as a negative 1. And that's when you have to make sure to divide that negative 1 by 1. Alright, so hopefully you will be able to see issues like this in your exercise, in your code, and will be able to solve for it before it becomes a bigger issue or before it gets deployed. or share it amongst your team, and then they will build upon this code, and it'll get worse and worse into as you continue. All right, so hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully this exercise help in using the if statement and the switch case, and how to use modulus to solve your problems. And yeah, if there's any other issue, just drop in a comment and let me know.